Hi, this is Mark Wilkerson. I'm the founder of Jury Trial Excellence. We're here in beautiful La Jolla, California, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to provide you a sampling of tips to win the jury over every time. AVS simply stands for Active Voiced Sentences. And what I want here, and this is a critical thing, it flows from this development of your major theme and your VVF, visualizing the verdict form. What you're now trying to do is focus on creating active voiced sentences that state both the major theme, and I gave you one example of how you might craft that earlier, but how you might state your major theme and also how you're going to state minor themes. Let's flip it and talk about a case from the defense standpoint. Let's say it's a complex insurance bad faith case, and you're defending the insurance company. Your AVS is to take your theme, which is maybe basically stated at the beginning, the insurance company tried diligently to settle, and they just were thwarted at every opportunity by the bad plaintiff's lawyer. That's kind of a broad statement of your major theme. An AVS might be something like this. This is a case, ladies and gentlemen, about an insurance company that acted reasonably and diligently and constantly tried to offer up its policy limits to settle this case because someone really was hurt. But at every turn of the road, the insurance company was turned away and rejected because of a lawyer who was trying to manipulate the insurance company into a bad faith setting. That's an example of an active voice sentence. None of this passivity, none of this kind of lame sounding sentences where you're saying, it is about this case that we're going to talk. You need to get with it and make it active, because the goal here is to make this case move forward and make it a story that the jury is going to understand and accept. And here's the key to this. If you develop these AVS early on in the case, and again, you can craft them further and modify them as time goes by and information comes in your discovery process, by the time you start with the jury, you can use these AVS, just like you can use your major theme, as early as voir dire. You are placing your method, your way of stating and framing up that case in the jury's mind from the very beginning. They hear it in voir dire, they hear it in your opening, they hear it in your questioning of your witnesses, and they hear it in the closing. And by the time they deliberate, they not only have heard that so many times that it's in their mind, but they have heard it in your words, framed up the way you want it. So when they go back to deliberate, even the way they will ask themselves the questions that they must deliberate about will be in your language and framing up your case. When I say get personal with the jury, I don't mean go up and get in their space, get too close to the bar of the jury. You need to play that very carefully, and it does tie into some authenticity issues. But what I mean is make the case personal. Get personal with your client, with the facts of the case. We talked about this case with the girl in the truck. Getting personal is one way of using your AVS. It's stating it with common sense metaphors, things that the jury understands. Use a little drama. But for example, you would say in your closing, as I told you, this is a case all about a young lady driving to her wedding rehearsal with excitement in her heart, which was turned into tragedy as she was crushed by this semi-truck that went through a stop sign and was texting while he was driving. That's another way of using your AVS, but what you're getting to here, notice how personal that was? It's about this girl. Her name's Julie Bryant. It's about a person, and you want to get personal with your client. You also want to make the case so the jury has to relate to the fact that these are real people. This isn't some client of yours. Not a client. This is Julie. This is the girl whose life was turned upside down by a reckless trucking company. And that's what I mean by getting personal. It does tie into authenticity because, bottom line, your credibility is derived from that of your witnesses, and that of your witnesses is derived again from your theme of the case. So your credibility rules the entire case. Stay to your authentic self. If you're soft-spoken, pause, be soft-spoken. Let things quiet down so that then you can be heard. If you've got a loud voice, use it, but don't get too close to the jury to intimidate them. Use your strengths. Turn your weaknesses, if you have a soft voice and think it's a weakness, turn it into a strength. Make it powerful. Use a little pause occasionally, use a little drama occasionally, but only use it to the extent that you're comfortable with it, because you have to present this case in a way that's authentic to you, because believe me, I've done this a lot. The jury will smell falsehood coming out of your lips so fast, and it will turn what frankly is a good case for your client upside down. The major theme is something, if you put yourself in the position of saying, what does the jury need to conclude for me to win this trial? That's identifying your major theme. And it sounds simple, but you need to spend time and focus on it. And the reason you need to do it early is because it sets the framework. It is the stage upon which your entire trial prep will play. So, for example, if you've got a case that involves a semi-truck that hit a girl who was crossing an intersection in her car, you need to say, what do I need the jury to decide for me to win? Well, what you want to win is you want to win punitive damages in that case because, and let me give you an example of how you'd state it. You want an active voice statement for what this theme is. You'd want to say something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about. So always think about, this is a case about, and it will frame it up for you. This is a case about a young woman driving reasonably and within the law on her way to her wedding rehearsal. And what happens as she's on her way to her wedding rehearsal? A semi-truck runs a stoplight and T-bones her, changing her life and her world forever. And the last thing she saw was looked up and saw that truck barreling down and saw that the driver was looking down and at the last second looked up and took his hands off the wheel. That's outrageous, and that's reckless indifference. That's an example of a major theme. Now, I've jazzed it up a little bit as though it was developed as time went by, but the idea here is get this theme early, and then you've got something that you can work with as you gather your evidence. But at least you've got a frame that ties the case together, and from that you derive what I call minor themes, or there's an acronym there. VVF just simply stands for Visualize the Verdict Form. Again, what you're doing here is, this is a bit of reverse engineering. We are within days of this case arriving in your office, and you've run it by your staff, and you've let them all, maybe I do sometimes, I have a contest. Winner gets lunch, but we have a contest to identify an accurate and well-stated major theme. Once you've got that stated, you need to think, what's the verdict form going to say? What do I need the verdict form that the judge presents to the jury at the end of the case to ask that jury to give me multiple opportunities to win? For example, going back to our case with the girl on her way to her wedding who gets T-boned. You don't want to just have, was the trucking company negligent? No. You want to say, was the trucking company negligent for running the stop sign? Was the trucking company negligent for violating a statute, negligence per se, that requires them not to run stop signs? Was the trucking company negligent because their driver was inattentive? Was the trucking company negligent because the driver was texting when this happened? Multiple opportunities to win, and by doing that and get yes, 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 now the jury is in the boat with one oar in their hand rowing with you, and when you get to the big question, the one you really want, was that trucking company recklessly indifferent, and were the major owners of that trucking company recklessly indifferent, warranting punitive damages by the way, when they set up a culture that required their drivers to frequently text the home office to tell them where they were and whether they were on their very tight time schedule. That's how you end up with punitive damages. You always hear lawyers, and you'll even hear judges, make the mistake of talking about opening argument as opposed to opening statement. There really is a technical distinction. Opening statement is supposed to tell the jury what you believe the evidence is going to be. And of course, closing, you're allowed to argue from the evidence to what the jury should conclude. But in reality, let's face it, you're not playing this game well unless you argue like crazy in your opening. I don't care if you have to salt it down depending on how strict your judge is or how objectioning your opponent is. I don't care if you have to salt it down with the occasional, the evidence will show, the evidence will show. What you're doing here is you're taking those AVS and you're taking that positive, active voice statement of your major theme, and you derive from that what your opening and closing arguments are going to be saying to the jury. That is your framework, and if you do it early, it sets the framework for your proof checklist, which we could talk about at another time, but it sets the framework so even before you take your first deposition, you want to have those themes, you want to have those AVS, you want to have an outline. Of course you can modify it as evidence comes in, but you want that outline of your clopening, the argument you want to make at the beginning and that you want to make at the end that's going to convince this jury, and you read over those bullet points every time before you take a deposition or review a medical record or anything substantive in the case, because it keeps you on target for what your case is about. I hope you've enjoyed these few tips. Understand, this is just a sampling. There's a lot to delve into with each of these and a lot of techniques that I can teach you, and there's a lot more tips I can provide you. If you want to learn some more about this, contact the link that you see here or contact me to schedule a consultation.